Hello and welcome to week 6 of PSPA 303X, state and local government. 6 weeks in, and we got a full head of steam at this point. Only a couple weeks left. So, I just want to say thank you for all of the hard work. You see improvements week to week. I appreciate that. Effort is the most important thing. I harp on that because it's important, you know. I appreciate the effort. First thing I want to touch on is I sent out a brief survey last week, and thank you to those who submitted responses to the survey and shared your thoughts and comments on the course thus far. Um, as a result of your responses, I was able to make a couple of changes to the course. Given that it is an 8-week condensed course, there are some things that I'm going to have to keep in place. I'm not able to change the weight of the quizzes, and the content is locked in at this point. But everything that was shared will be taken into consideration for next semester. And in terms of the remaining couple of weeks, what I've done is made two changes. One is I'm making the content available sooner in the week. So you'll see content available tomorrow at 8 a.m. in terms of the discussion questions, in terms of the writing assignments. So they'll be made available tomorrow. And then I've also given 10 additional minutes of time to complete the quiz. So those are the two things that I took away from the survey responses that I wanted to ensure we incorporated for the remaining couple of weeks of the course. It's very important that we take what you say seriously. Unfortunately, as I said, with the tight schedule, there are certain things that we could not adjust this time around, but we certainly take it into consideration for next semester. So we do have extra time on the quizzes, and the content for discussions and writing assignments is now being made available on Tuesdays instead of Wednesdays. So thanks again for those who responded. Now we're in week 6, modules 11 and 12, looking at local governments and metro politics. And I've shared my work experience now being at the state level, working with the Illinois Office of Minority Economic Empowerment. Prior to that, I was working with the city of Rockford, Illinois, municipal government, and I also did some work with a public housing authority, which is federally funded, but it operates at the local level. So each of those experiences was very interesting. And reading this chapter, it's to me very exciting because, and my perspective, the national stuff gets the most attention. It's the most sexy. It's the most interesting. It's the hottest, sizzle all over our televisions and, push notifications to the phone. But all politics is local. And, we live our lives, in communities at the local level. And the government structures that we are closest to me, are the most interesting. And now that we're looking at local governments, I just get very, it's just so interesting. And I think it's important that, we take enough away from the things that we're reading to carry into our lives and be more informed and ultimately more powerful. So in terms of the content discussed, the lecturer did a really good job. I felt discussing the difference in, at a high level, the difference in municipal structures, county government structure, city government structures, and then the mayor, manager, council relationships. He shared his thoughts on the way that the book handled it and how he presented it. So I thought that was good. Really appreciated how he broke down the different access points that citizens have to engage the local government. To me, this is so important because that's where we leverage our power and that's where we advance our interests. So, of course, voting is one of those ways to engage. And we just participated in a national election. And every 4 years they push us, because it's a election of a generation, and we need to vote or die every 4 years. And of course, voting is very important, but it's so much more interesting than that, and dynamic than that. So I appreciate that more points were shared, points of access were shared. Obviously, we do want to make sure we're voting, but I think we need to think about voting as we're not voting to get something, we're voting to protect something. And I think he touched on that too. Maybe one day you'll have a house, you have kids, and maybe you'll have a business, and you vote to protect your interests. That's the most important thing you can do. Um, uh, so voting is one thing. Then, sorry about that. So just a couple of the other points he discussed. I just wanted to share my experience. The concept of NIMBY, not in my backyard, NIMBY. When I was working with the Rockford Housing Authority, this was a couple of years ago, there was a proposed family housing development at a site called Newtown. They were calling it the Newtown Development. And it was on the east side of Rockford and closer to commercial business developments, commercial corridors. It was close to a school. There was a site that they wanted to put a multi-family public housing development on. And during the process, there was these, public comment opportunities. And it turned into such a contentious issue in the community. It really brought out a lot of people and a lot of energy that we would think in the 21st century that was not as prevalent. It became people's fears were exposed, and people's it was us versus them. They are moving into our neighborhood, and I'm afraid that they are gonna bring things that we're afraid of to this neighborhood. People were crying at public hearings. People were yelling at each other, screaming. Police presence had to be there, all because the notion of developing safe, decent, affordable housing, was good, but not in my backyard. Don't bring it here. We don't want it here. There were a number of these conversations, and you can Google this. You can look it up. It was a wild time. And those fears, property values, crime, those kids coming to these schools. It was some wild stuff to see. Not in my backyard, essentially. The emotion, the people aspect of, civics and government and politics is emotion. And ultimately, the development came to fruition. It was built. And there have been no issues. There have been no issues to speak of, no more than the community had before or any other part of the community has. And it just really exposed a lot of people. There were some business interests that said they didn't want it to be developed as well. And, so that's the NIMBY piece. And it played out in real time for everybody to see. And it really drew some hard lines for a lot of people in the community in Rockford. So that's NIMBY. Another point in these access points I wanted to touch on is the advisory boards, the decision making, contributing to the decision making processes of the bureaucracy. And when I was with the city of Rockford, I interacted a little bit on the economic development side, not the zoning side. There was a board called the Liquor and Tobacco Advisory Board. And this was a group of a couple aldermen and then some citizens who volunteered and participated to oversee the process of people applying for liquor licenses and being able to sell tobacco. at stores and bars and restaurants. Big thing was the liquor license. It was the most contentious piece. Uh, and essentially, this board is making recommendations to the council whether or not a entrepreneur should be awarded a liquor license. This board is making decisions as to whether or not an entrepreneur can make money. The liquor license is all about making money, and there's a lot of money to be made selling spirits. And the story behind that, there's always a story. Who's on the board, what entrepreneur is making this proposal, what part of town is it on, are they afraid of this part of town? There's always a story that you want to consider, and whose interests are being advanced or whose interests are being contested. There's always a story. All politics is local. People are irrational and emotional. We don't always make the best decisions, and there's always a story. So those two pieces, I just wanted to share my experience being a bureaucrat and administrator at the local level with these access points. And it's just so important for us to know and consider what our interests are. The lecturer talked about how oftentimes older people dominate these decision-making points. He mentioned that, sometimes it's kind of considered to be, how nerdy do you have to be to participate in a council, commission, board, share feedback in a public comments period. It needs to be reconsidered. I think it's not about being nerdy. It's about protecting your interests. And history is riddled with examples of these opportunities to contribute to decisions coming up, and an outcome takes place that people aren't happy with. History happens to people. These interests are being advanced by certain people, and you want to just protect yours, your family's, your community's interests by engaging at one of these access points. And at local level is where the heat really is, where we leverage our power. So those access points were really interesting to me. He also talked about, how services are administered at the local level and how the structures, municipal structures impact service delivery. And in some instances, they're governments that merge for a number of different reasons. And I thought he shared a good example of cities across the country that merged in order to administer services more efficiently, save money, do a number of things. There were a number of examples. One of them was Indianapolis that he mentioned. And I thought, he shared a little bit of that story where the urban center, Indianapolis, inside of a more rural county and state, those political interests weren't aligned. So it seemed that they wanted to have that municipality merge in order to weaken some of the urban political interests. And obviously, the story probably that came out of the decision was about public service efficiency, being able to meet the needs of citizens. But the people's story was political power. And there's always a story, and that's what you want to be looking for and listening for. You just want to make sure that story doesn't happen to you and your people and your family. Uh, and and just something to keep in mind, as we learn about gentrification and eminent domain and how all of these things play out. You just want to be aware and have an opportunity to contribute to the decision and protect your interests. So what it's all about. Again, this is my perspective is the local level is the most exciting because that's where we can leverage our power. Also talked about voting with your feet. That's an interesting concept. You can vote with your dollars as well. Never underestimate the power that we have. And learning this stuff is only enhancing our power. So again, that's what we're getting into now: local government and metro politics. Some great writing assignments and discussion posts. Looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. As always, if you got questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to be a resource, and have a great week.